This is going to be a continuation of a video I did a little back, which was titled The Roots of Atheism/Theism Stances, Part 1, The Foundation of Religious Belief, basically. And in that, I covered aspects of a theistic mindset, which is about spirituality and how morality itself can be included in that aspect. In this one, I'll be talking about atheism itself and how atheist influence is impactful of the greater narrative for those who do not adhere to a religious doctrine or idealism around morality. The first thing to ask then is, what exactly is atheism? Because if you are going to be talking about morality in relation to atheism/theism, we need to understand what we are dealing with by definitions and standards. What atheism therefore is defined by the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, I think quite accurately. Atheism. The term atheist describes a person who does not believe that God or a divine being exists. Worldwide, there may be as many as a billion atheists. Exactly. That line, I'll say this much: who the hell knows how many there actually are? Although social stigma, political pressure, and intolerance makes accurate polls difficult. And it's especially the case because some countries make it super difficult for atheists to come out openly in the first place. So this says there as many as a billion, but who the hell actually knows how many atheists there actually are? It could be less than a billion, more than a billion, who the hell knows? But in the grand scheme of things, it's still a noticeable amount in the grand scheme of things. Also, at the same time, the American Atheists website says this point, which is super important. All atheists are different, and I'm saying this because this should be very obvious, but some people don't get this memo. But I'm saying this here for disclaimers. The only common thread that ties all atheists together is a lack of belief in gods. Some of the best debates we've ever had have been with fellow atheists. This is because atheists do not have a common belief system, sacred script, or atheist pope. This means atheists often disagree on many issues and ideals. Atheists come in various shapes, colours, beliefs, convictions, and backgrounds. We are as unique as our fingerprints, which is fair enough to say, because are we highlighting a point about the backgrounds thing? How atheists coming from one background over another will determine the overall trajectory of the atheist themselves in the direction they take. Dynamics like this also plays a role. From this discussion, we may identify three basic categories of atheistic belief, and that's in this say atheistic belief is fair enough to say because atheistic standards, fine. One, non-belief in a deity without taking any position on the issue being God. Two, agnostic atheism, expressing disbelief to some degree, but without a claim of knowing. Skepticism or skeptics. And three, gnostic atheists, firmly rejecting the existence of a deity. Then there's also the fourth category, which is anti-theists, which is basically where it's a different form of gnostic atheism. It's just targets different things entirely. Not basically. Then in anti-theism, it's no longer just in yourself, but rather talking about society itself rather than just you itself. If that's clear. One category that is in play here also is, as I'll be now expanding into the two main subsects of atheism, that is, atheism from former religious belief, and in my case, ex-Christian atheism, because I was raised up in Catholic traditions and therefore believing that ended up being an atheist. And this is what is, I will classify in this as theist to atheist, because there's a difference between mindset between theist atheist and never theist atheist. The never theist atheist is someone who was never in a church and never got entangled within religious culture, life, or traditions. And the mindsets and understandings of religion itself will be very different between the two groups themselves. The never theist atheist, therefore, is of a very different nature. The never theist atheist would be in a state in which they would be not that attuned to some of the religious cultures and actions. So, in some ways, the non religious people who never was raised around that environment can have a tendency to be more naive about religious roles and traditions. For example, I was doing a course around religion and world politics. It was actually fine as a course because it was kept to secular content, but in a grand scheme of things, it was actually quite an interesting thing because in a room there was a mix of people. There was some who were of course there were theists in the room, obviously, and they didn't talk to me. They didn't talk to me because most theists don't like me anyway because I don't really let them get away with anything. But the atheists in the room were interesting because there were some atheists in the room who were raised in basically a purely atheist background, and therefore, as a result, was very immature to the nature of religion itself, and often prone to not understanding the true nature of religion. Then let's extend back forward to next semester after. In this, we were talking about political philosophy, and there was a older member, more in their senior years, former Catholic like myself, and they were the complete opposite because they are an atheist while growing up in the actual religion itself and raised up around it. They were much more hardline anti-religious than those who were never raised in religion itself. These dynamics I will expand on in a second with much more detail. What it comes down to is deconstruction. If you deconstruct or not will be the big variant in this dynamic, depending and changing the outcome of this. For example, if you are never a atheist, you do not need to deconstruct from religious ideals or communities. You basically had it filtered out early on and it never became an issue in the first place. Therefore, as a direct result of that, the never theists, atheists, did not need to deconstruct. That is why they are often so out of touch with many things about religion. Of course, they have their rights to not want to know about religion. That's their right, I guess. But in the grand scheme of things, they are still misinterpreting a lot of stuff around it because they have not really assessed the impact on religion on themselves, which is the whole process of deconstruction. Deconstruction itself is the critical analysis in which you need to do if you leave religion. Deconstruction is something which you could do anyway, and just to clarify, you can deconstruct and not leave religion entirely, and that's perfectly fine. What the difference is, though, is that the never theist atheists do not deconstruct, and the former theist atheists do deconstruct, and that is what makes the gap of knowledge so major in the grand scheme of things. And that is why the dynamic I'm talking about here is so important. What unique challenges do each other face then? That is quite simple. The challenges each other face will be drastically different depending on the pathway, as I partially outlined already. The biggest difference, however, will be the tolerance of each other, as in the atheists who are never theist atheists and former theist atheists. How often the case is, the never theist atheists, of course, there's a chance that they can become the activists and spokespeople themselves, but in the grand scheme of things, there's a much higher chance they will be the ones who do not care much for the actual proposal and advancement of the actual opposing religion. Whereas the former theists have a much higher chance of being more activistic in their intentions. And that's the only real difference between the two in this dynamic. And how this relates to morality is also quite interesting. Morality itself is formed by multiple variants. It's formed by your community, who you are close to, your outlook, and your political mindsets and philosophies. And that is what determines your morality. For example, atheism itself has no morality attached to it. Theism has a morality attached to it, as it claims a moral judgment and side to it, whereas atheism does not. Atheism, after all, is, as I said in the beginning, just a disbelief. And in the grand scheme of things, then, as a whole, this then leads into what is the morality going to be in the aftermath of leaving religion, or just never being raised up around religion. That is what this is going to be about. There's no faith alone logic or divine command theory in this, because obvious reason there's no faith-based principles necessarily working in this. Another dynamic that can play into this is also the red flags of belief systems. It might seem invisible to those on the outside, but those raised within religious structures know what they are. If you know what the red flags are, you can actually know what to look out for and what to avoid. It sadly, though, comes at a thing where you need to be exposed or know someone who has been exposed to it. So the harm principle is in effect here, that someone basically needs to get hurt for you to know, or someone close to you to know in the first place. So, and that is why in some cases, the never theist atheists will not see a lot of these red flags, and it's not necessarily their fault. So this is what I say to ex-theist atheists: do not necessarily blame the never theist atheists for their blindness in this. It is not necessarily their fault, because they were never raised up around the religious narratives which constructed these harmful practices. What then happens to morality in this dynamic? It is quite simple, actually. Atheism itself no longer applies. Atheism begins and ends with the question of, is there a God, or is there the existence of a higher power? Yes, theist, no atheist. So what then happens with morality? Morality comes with multiple forms. You can be then taking your principles from liberalism, conservatism, libertarianism, communism, socialism, and so on. Or in other cases, you can be simply put adapting some okay principles from your former religious life, which was not harmful, because not all religious beliefs are harmful, because some of them are actually compatible with humanistic intentions. And that is where the difference is here in morality. Basically saying there is no universal morality in the system.